Club today, which would have been quite a nice link, wouldn't it, between the shoe people and these fish, but unfortunately you can't actually keep Dover soles in aquariums. But we have got an expert here. This is Dr. David Ford from the Aquarium Advisory Service.
Hi.
You're not a real doctor though, are you?
Well, a scientist.
Are you a doctor of fishes then?
Oh yes.
You get doctor
of
fishes?
Oh yes, yes.
Extraordinary.
Yes, we study their needs.
You study their needs? People come into you with sick fish?
Oh yes, yes, certainly. I run an advisory service and we deal with, 5,000 queries a year.
Extraordinary. Well, let's look at some of the fish you brought in.
Oh, yeah.
Now, these aren't your goldfish you get at the fair, are they?
Well, goldfish are pedigree nowadays.
Are they?
You get. There's so many different varieties that you can get. It really is incredible. It's a fascinating hobby now.
So what are these ones here?
Well, that one's called a pearl scale. That one is called an oranda. And you see how they've been bred into special shapes and special colours. And they make marvellous pets. They really do. We
had some Japanese goldfish on the Wide Awake Club quite recently. I think they were
No, they were koi.
And they were absolutely massive. They were a bit like the very fat one here.
That's right. Well, they're pond fish rather than aquaria fish.
And they were very, very valuable. Are these
expensive
they are,
to buy? No, they're not too bad. You can get really good specimens for just £1 or £2.
This looks actually very, very exotic. Is it an expensive thing to buy? This
to set up a thing like that? No, it's not at all, because lots of equipment are available that you can get at reasonable prices. Really, you can spend just as much as you want. You can have a very small setup like this, or a very, very large aquarium. So really, it's just according to your own requirements.
Right. OK, well, let's look at this fella here, because he is absolutely fantastic. Can you see him? Now, he's got a permanent smile on him. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Isn't he fantastic? What's he?
Well, that's called a yellow tang, and these are coral fish, and this is seawater. But it's artificial seawater. Again, all the technology has been done to make it an easy hobby. There's been a lot of research over many years to develop all the equipment to make the problems go away, leaving just the pleasure of fish keeping.
So presumably he'd actually be quite a difficult fish to keep in your sitting room?
Well, no, not really, if you use this equipment. You need to know what you're doing. This is why it's a good idea to contact advisory services like mine to find out exactly how to do it right. But it's quite simple, it really is.
And presumably you couldn't put them in there?
Well, no, they're freshwater,
and
these are marine.
Right.
There's three sections to the hobby. There is the cold water fish, which is a goldfish, then there is the marine section, and then there is the tropical fish.
But they are cannibals, aren't they, fish?
Well,
I mean, there are
some
fish
are, yes. It can be an underwater jungle there. Yeah. But providing you choose the fish that mix together, then again you've got no problem, and these are known as community fish.
Right.
But your local shopkeeper can explain which is the right fish to mix.
If you are actually interested in keeping fish, then there's a special exhibition.
Oh, there is. Yes, this weekend.
This weekend?
It's at Sandown Racecourse,
you
know, the exhibition centre there, and it's on from 10 till 6 today and 10 till 5 tomorrow. Thousands of fish, all on show.
Smashy, thanks very much for that. I'm just going to call on Tommy. This is the only opportunity he gets to do this. We have to humour him. Go on.
Fish!
OK. Now over to another fish. James, for this week.
Fish! 1 minute.
Strange old world underwater, isn't it? You know, keeping fish could make the ideal pet because they don't make any noise, they don't make any mess, and they don't need any exercising. And scientists have proved that by watching fish, you can lower your blood pressure. Dentists seem to have known that for ages. Let's see what Bruce thinks about them.
Right, that's right.
Hello. Bruce, are you a fish fan?
Of course I'm a fish fan, but I'm not a fish expert. David Ford, on the other hand, is a fish fan and an expert.
Right.
And David is an aquarist. An aquarist is an expert on the tank itself, on the aquarium, and also on the fish that go in it.
So I can pick David's brains about fish today?
Absolutely, and I'm going to go off and look at some of them around here.
Okay, have fun.
Okay.
David.
Hi.
There are fish and fish, aren't there? They're not all the same.
That's true.
What's the differences, basically?
Well, that's what makes the hobby so fascinating. You've got so many different types that you can keep. There are the freshwater fish, cold water fish, such as goldfish and koi, and the tropical fish, many different varieties. And, of course, there are saltwater fish. In fact, you could have a whole coral reef in your living room.
But before we get to the coral reef stage, what are the basics we need to start with?
First of all, you need a tank.
Yeah.
And I think the smallest tank that you should have is this one, which is 24 by 12 by 12 inches.
Yeah, why?
Now, because fish have to swim in their own loo.
Oh, very nice.
So, obviously, the larger the volume of water, the better for the fish.
Yeah. And what do you need then?
Well, then you need to place some gravel on the bottom of the aquarium. And you can get this from the aquarium shop, but do remember this is dirty, so it must be thoroughly washed before you put it into the aquarium.
Why must it be thoroughly washed?
Well, it will cloud your water, you see.
Oh, it's not bad for the fish, it's just you won't see them.
Just rinse it very thoroughly until it's clean, then place it in a layer at the bottom of the tank about 1 inch thick.
Yeah. And then you put the water in. Now, is that ordinary water?
Well, yes, ordinary tap water will do, and fill it up just a few inches below the surface so you can put other things in the tank without it overflowing. But although you use tap water, that is not really suitable for the fish. You need to treat that water. And what you use is products like this, water safe.
Yeah.
Again, you can get those from the aquarium shop and pre-prepare that water before you get any fish.
Right, now, so we've got the gravel and we've made the water nice and clean. What about the stones that we're putting in to decorate? Could they be just ones from the garden?
Well, they could. Your problem there is you do not know if anything's going to dissolve out of that stone and therefore harm the fish. It's far better, again, to go along to the aquarium shop and buy the proper stones that they sell for decorating the tank.
And what else do we need for decorating it?
Well, you can use plants, real plants or plastic plants. It's up to you whether you want an underwater garden.
I just happen to have a very pretty plastic part here, and just watch this. Instant underwater tropical. Okay, so from there.
Well, then you need to make sure that that water stays clear and clean. And you do that by continuous filtration. So what you need is a filter system, and there are many different types on the market. Here's one, for example, that you place inside the aquarium. All you have to do is plug in and switch on, and that filters the water continuously for you.
So that actually points out that if you're going to have an aquarium, put it near a plug.
Oh, yes.
Otherwise
yes,
you have to move it too late.
You do need a power supply.
Yeah.
Then, on the top of the aquarium, of course, you need a light, because you need to be able to see the fish.
And the light fittings are usually
Yes.
in a lid like that.
That's right.
Is it essential to have a lid on the top?
Oh, it is. Because remember, fish can jump out. But also a lid will prevent the dust going in as well.
Yeah.
Inside that lid, you can have a light. There are different types. If you've got real plants, for example, you need a special lighting. All these are available at the aquarium shop. If you've got fluorescent lighting, you'll need a starter like this. But again, whole kits are available.
Yeah.
Now, to bring that water to life, you need to have bubbles coming up. And you do that by having an air pump. There are many, many different models available. The air that pump will send to the aquarium is through an airline tubing, and that tubing is then attached to an air stone which distributes the bubbles. And the whole thing looks very pretty. It sort of brings the aquarium scene to life.
Yeah.
The only additional equipment you need for tropical fish is to heat the water to about 25 degrees centigrade.
And how would you do that?
Well, you have a heater thermostat. Again, many models are available. Additionally, you will add this to the aquarium and it'll maintain that temperature for you.
Yeah. So it's all bumping up the price a bit, but well worth it.
Oh, yes, it is. The basic tank is about £20. You can double that for all the equipment that you need. But that's still not very expensive.
Right. So having done all that, all you need then is the fish. Where should we get the fish from?
You must go to a reputable aquarium shop or a specialist breeder so that you've got fish that you know will be free of any diseases.
And what's the first fish you should start with?
Well, you can start with an ordinary common goldfish, which are very hardy fish.
Okay.
A good starter's fish.
May I have a goldfish, please? And here we have goldfish. Now, what do I do? Undo the plastic bag and put them straight in there?
No, don't do that. Float the bag to acclimatise the fish to any temperature difference there is between the water that's in the bag and the water that's in the aquarium.
I didn't know that. What? Why?
Well, they can get a temperature shock.
Yeah.
So when the temperatures are the same, then you can open the bag and allow the fish to swim out into the aquarium.
Well, what would happen if I didn't, if I just bung them straight in?
You can stress the fish, and stressed fish, of course, get diseases.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to have diseased fish, don't allow them to have any stress.
I think that's very well worth noting that. Now, after you've had the goldfish, what's the next most popular fish you could get?
Oh, tropical fish, and there are so many different varieties. There are some 20,000 species of fish that you can keep in an aquarium. You should have perhaps a platy or an angelfish. Now, they're what we call community fish. That is fish that can live together quite happily without it turning into an underwater jungle.
And what about the one that I do know the name of, the guppy?
Yes, a guppy is quite a nice little fish that you can keep as one of the community range.
And those pretty ones with the flashes on, neons?
Oh, they're neon tetras. Yes,
Yeah.
they're also a community fish, and you can have those in your community tank.
So we've got the fish from the right place. What do we feed them on?
Well, you should feed them on a proprietary brand of fish flakes, such as this type, because all the research has been done to make sure that all the necessary vitamins and minerals, proteins and so on are present in the diet.
Now, that doesn't look anything like the little crumbly bits I used to put in.
Oh, the old biscuit crumb.
Is that all they were?
That's all they were. Well, no, a lot of research has been done since then to produce a food that contains everything the fish requires to keep it happy and healthy all its life.
Yeah. And how many times a day would they need to be fed, and how much, roughly?
You can feed once or twice a day with sufficient number of flakes for them to eat in 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. And what happens if they don't eat them?
Well, any that's left over you should always remove.
Goodness, I didn't know that. So, as soon as these little fish are out, how long will it take for them to acclimatise to this tank?
About 20 minutes, that's all.
Well, in 20 minutes' time, they can go into the tank and they've already got their dinner. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Fish, didn't I? And you can't get more wacky than that, can you? Anyway, let's have a look properly at these wacky fish. This is David Ford, who's come in with a couple of his very own fish. Now, this is quite a remarkable goldfish, isn't it?
Yes, he is. He's an ornamental. It's a fancy goldfish, not an ordinary one. He's called an
beautiful.
oranda. He's beautiful. He's got a beautiful face, hasn't he?
He looks like an old man with the big hanging down
right,
cheeks, doesn't
yeah.
he? He's fascinating.
But have you seen
what are
these? They are piranha.
They're piranhas.
They are piranha. That's Jaws 1 and that's Jaws 2.
Wow. Now, the obvious question about piranhas is, can they eat you? Because they look a little bit small to me to be able to eat you.
They're not really as bad as Hollywood would have us believe. They're quite nice fish. When they're on their own like that, they're rather sensitive and quite shy. It's when you get a shoal of them taking a little bite each. But there are many different types of piranhas. Some of them are actually vegetarians. They eat fruit.
Really?
But they will eat you. They've got little tiny teeth that are like razor blades, not like daggers, like little razor blades. But they'd only take a small bite.
So, in fact, if I put my finger in there, I'd still have half a finger left if I pulled it out.
No, it'll only take a little bit.
Just a little bit,
Yes,
a little bit of the nail or
that's
something
right,
like that.
yeah.
They really are wonderful. Now, it's become quite a big hobby, hasn't it, collecting exotic fish?
It's Britain's most fastest growing hobby at the moment.
Is it really?
We've done a survey and discovered that now that take any 100 homes in Britain and you'll find that 14 of them have got ornamental fish.
That's quite a percentage, really,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Now, tell us what you actually have to keep exotic fish, because people always think that it's such a bind to keep exotic fish, but it's not actually that difficult, is it?
It's fascinating, it really is. What has happened is the manufacturers have built all this sort of equipment, as you see in the tanks here, to take away the problems of fish keeping, leaving just the pleasure.
So you literally just buy the tank like that?
Yes, and you can buy all the equipment. All you have to do is plug in, fill it up with water, of course, plug in and switch on, and away it goes. And it keeps the water quality good. And that's the secret of fish keeping. If you've got good water, then the fish will be happy and healthy.
Does it have to be a certain temperature as well, the water?
Well, it depends on what type of fish you've got. Believe it or not, there are 20,000 species of fish, any one of which you can keep in an aquarium.
What, this sort of size aquarium? Or
all sorts of sizes. The bigger, the better, actually.
What would you do if you wanted 2 different types of fish that need different temperature water?
Well, then you'd set up 2 different tanks.
You'd have to have 2 tanks.
There are many people who've set up fish houses with rows and rows of tanks.
Really?
It gets so fascinating. Yeah, what has happened is these 14% of households who own fish, they get so interested in the fish themselves, they join local clubs. And there are 300 aquarium clubs in the United Kingdom. And they themselves have got together and formed an association. You've got groups like the Association of Aquarists. And they get together with manufacturers like ourselves, the manufacturers of aquarium fish food, and form shows like the one that's at Sandown Park this very weekend.
Now, when's this on? It's a big sort of aquarium. It shows fish, it shows all the equipment and everything, and it's at Sandown Park, which is in Esher, isn't it?
That's right, in Esher.
And what, today is it on?
It's today and tomorrow, 10 till 6 today and 10 till 5 tomorrow. And it's called the Aquarian Fish Keeping Exhibition. And what we've got there is tableaus of fish, all the biggest fish there, big and beautiful.
Wonderful.
There's a special section for children, children's
Great.
fish.
That's smashing. So if you want to know anything about it, that's the place to go this weekend.
Well, I'll be there with my advisory service, and we
so
give out free
questions can be
beginner's
asked.
guides to
Wonderful.
people who want to know what
Well, thanks ever so much
do.
for bringing them in. That's super,
Okay.
David. Thanks very much.
Okay,
Actually, I'm sure they've got some pretty strange fish in the sea surrounding Australia, but there are also some fairly weird animals found on land, excluding Timmy Mullet, that is. But anyway, Timmy was there and he found out what sort of wildlife is in Sydney. G'day, White.
Now like to set up your own aquarium, but perhaps you would like a little bit of help or maybe a bit of advice, you could get in contact with the Aquarian Advisory Service. To tell us more about that, David Ford. So David, what exactly does your advisory service do?
Well, it's an English language but international free service to all aquarists. It's sponsored by Aquarian, you know, the manufacturers of fish foods and remedies, and we get people writing in with any problems that they get with fish keeping, and we help them via letters that are sent back with all the information or booklets that they want on particular parts of the hobby.
And that covers cold water, marine and tropical, does it?
All aspects of fish keeping, whether it's aquariums or ponds or whatever, breeding the fish, showing the fish and so on, but particularly beginners. Because I think it's important that people realise that they are pets, but they are living animals. It's more than just a living ornament. They're real animals, they're alive, they need to be looked after properly. So it's important that people who are thinking of starting an aquarium should write to me and get a guide telling them just what to do before they go out and buy the fish.
What are the most common problems then that your advisory service has to deal with?
I think the main problem is water quality. It's so important that the fish live in good quality water, and people need to know about filtration techniques, that they should change some of that water. A thing I always tell people, especially beginners, about fish keeping is that always remember the fish are swimming in their own loo. So that water needs flushing. So the thing to do is to set up some sort of filter system so that the excreta from the fish is removed instantly by constant filtration techniques, and then to do partial water changes to maintain that fresh water. If you keep the water right, good quality water, then the fish will be happy. And a happy fish is free of disease.
Now, you were telling me earlier that, in fact, fish are like dogs or cats, and they can actually lower your blood pressure. Now, you can't stroke a fish like you can stroke a dog and cat. So how does that work?
Well, it's another universe. If after a hard day's work you come home and sit down and look into that universe, it's a silent, quiet world, so different to the one we live in. And it's a proven medical fact that as you look into the aquarium, your blood pressure goes down, your heartbeat reduces, and that's good for you these days.
Sure. And just finally, what advice would you give to those people that are going to set up, having watched this, their own aquarium?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to read a beginner's guide that tells you the basics of how to keep fish in captivity. We do our own free beginner's guide. People just have to drop me a line, no need for a stamp or anything, and then I send them along this Fish Keeping Made Easy, which tells them all the basic facts on how to keep them.
And the address to write to is this: David Ford, Aquarium Advisory Service, Oakwell Way, Birstall, Batley, West Yorkshire, WF17 9LU, England. And if you are going...
All right. Just trying to be positive.
That's why he gave us the Phillipson account, isn't it? Hmm? Set us up.
Well, she told me she came to Gerard for a perm.
Any calls?
How much were these?
Forget the fish, Jonathan. We have a future to think about.
Have we? Look at this place. How can we have been so stupid? Oh, we don't deserve a future.
If you're going to sit and agonise, then I suggest...
As a matter of fact, I have found every number in my address book this morning. Look.
Keeping fish can make an ideal hobby, one that'll provide hours of enjoyment for all the family. A well-planned and stocked aquarium can make a delightful addition to any home. There are 3 types of aquarium fish, the most difficult to keep being the marine variety that live in salt water. Tropical fish make an excellent choice for a first aquarium, but you'll need to buy special apparatus. The cold water variety are the simplest to keep, like goldfish and their more exotic cousins. Dr. David Ford is recognised as the country's leading authority on fish keeping as a hobby. From his West Yorkshire home, he runs the Aquarian Advisory Service, a completely free source of help and advice for both beginners and experienced aquarists. The 10,000 inquiries that he receives each year come from all over the world. So just how popular is the hobby?
It's very popular, and its popularity is increasing. There used to be about 10% of British households owning fish of some sort, but now it's 14%, so it's very popular.
If you wanted to take up fish keeping as a hobby, how would you go about setting up your own aquarium?
Well, the first secret is not to have a small one. The greater the volume of water, the easier it is to keep the fish. So don't start with just a goldfish bowl. Do go out and get a large aquarium. At least 2 foot long is the ideal size. For example, we have one here. This is a standard 2 foot aquarium. You can get 3 foot and 4 foot and so on. As I say, the bigger the better. But the thing to do is to make sure that the quality of the water is ideal for the fish. So the thing you also need is a filtration system of some kind. There are many on the market. Also, you need a cover, because you don't want the fish to jump out. And having got a cover, to be able to see the fish, you need a light. So what I like to use is a fluorescent light, which has its own inbuilt starter, instead of using an ordinary incandescent bulb, which makes it too hot, you see. You can buy this equipment already set up for you, that all you have to do is plug in and switch on. Now, if you have a cold water tank, that's the simplest to run, because there are no running costs other than the cost of the light, which is about £1 a week. But if you want tropical fish, then you have to have a heater. And I've got one here in the aquarium. That's a heater thermostat, which will maintain the water at the ideal temperature for the tropical fish. You also therefore need a thermometer, no longer the old-fashioned glass sort of thermometer. What you have now is called a digital thermometer, which will tell you the exact temperature of the water through the glass. You just put that on the front of the glass and can read it. The point to make is that all this equipment has been developed by the manufacturers to take away the technical difficulties of keeping fish, leaving you just the pleasure of the hobby.
As a beginner, presumably you shouldn't be over-ambitious.
Oh, no. Do start simply and learn how to look after the fish. That learning process is part of the fun of the hobby. But not only that, don't forget it's good for your health. It's a medically proven fact that looking into an aquarium, into that silent, colourful, separate universe, has a calming effect. It actually lowers your blood pressure and reduces your heart rate. It's good for you.
Ring us now on Leeds 448199 and we'll send you a free information pack about this fascinating hobby. The first 50 callers will also receive a free instructional video for beginners. Our address for the leaflets only is Help Yourself, Keeping Fish, Yorkshire Television, Leeds LS3 1JS.
Look at the pretty blue ones.
Hey, Mom, the fish have babies!
Paul, what's this new fish?
Well, look at the extensive development of the barbels, the whiskers there. It's obviously a pimmolated cat of some kind.
Mardell Laboratories and Aquarian Food are proud to present Help with the Home Aquarium from Paul Spiess, the aquatic maestro.
I'm Paul Spiess, sometimes called the aquatic maestro. Yes, and I've been called other things too, you're right. I recently had an advantage of taking a trip to Mardell Laboratories, and there I met the most delightful gent. Now, he says things like, laboratories and aquarist, and he talks about mushy peas, and I guess you know he's not from New Jersey then. No, in fact, this gentleman is from Yorkshire, England. I'm talking about Dr. David Ford, a master aquarist at Thomas Industries, the creator of Aquarian Foods. And I said to him, David, without giving away any trade secrets, what can you tell us about the development of Aquarian food?
Trade secrets are really all to do with process development, with manufacturing methods. It's certainly no secret that what we use are fresh raw materials. For example, the basic diet that's supplied for tropical fish I added to this particular recipe 6 different formulae, because then it caters for all the different types of fish one can keep in a community tank. And therefore you'll find the fish will eat different types of flake according to their own preferences. But we also cater for the specialist fish. For example, the vegetable diet. Now what I did here was to add the type of vegetable material that fish require in their basic diet when they are herbivorous. In this recipe you will find kelp and spinach, and would you believe, Yorkshire mushy peas. The reason is that the food is manufactured in Yorkshire, England, where such raw materials are in plentiful supply. And in the laboratory tank here we do have live-bearing fish that thrive on this sort of diet. Mollies, guppies and the swordfish, as you see here, swordtails. The vitamin and mineral flake is another specialist recipe that I found was necessary, because if fish are stressed, if they've had a disease such as white spot or fungus, or even if they're breeding when their demand for vitamins increases dramatically, then what you need to add to their basic diet is a source of extra vitamin food, and this is the particular recipe that I developed for the requirements of those particular conditions and fish. Now, if you have bottom feeding fish, catfish such as the Corridorus we have in the tank here, they do like to feed off the bottom of the tank, and of course a traditional flake food floats for quite a while on the top of the water. So what we've done is taken that same 6 recipe basic diet and pressed it into a tablet food, and that tablet can be placed on the bottom of the aquarium where the catfish can gather round and eat it at their leisure. Also it can be fed in the evening, because many of these catfish are nocturnal feeders. We also have a fry food. Now, when I developed this particular diet, it was because I knew from breeding fish in the laboratory that the fry required more than just a ground-up flake. They did need extra protein to allow them to have the necessary amino acids for them to grow rapidly. So in this fry food, we have a slightly modified recipe with higher levels of protein. But it is ground down to make it fine enough so that even the smallest of fry can accept it as their first food. We have a goldfish diet here, which was very interesting, because when I started the first feeding trials with goldfish in the aquaria, I found that the tropical blend with the 6 different recipes was too high in protein. The goldfish were breaking that protein down as an energy source, and the ammonia and nitrite that was being produced polluted the aquarium. You've got the cloudy water problem. So I modified the recipe by including extra carbohydrate. Now this is a white flake and is the 7th recipe in the range, and that white flake is added to the other 6 to give the particular blend we call goldfish food, which is very suitable for ordinary goldfish, for ornamental, fancy goldfish, and for koi. The carnivorous diet was specially developed for fish that do require meat and fish flesh in their diet. For example, cichlids, as we have here, do require a chunky type of flesh in their diet, which is catered for by having a flake that includes that particular raw material. We use fresh fish, we use fresh meat, and this is turned into a flake food and sold under the name, as you see here, carnivore fish food. Of course, we have specialist fish. There are many guppy keepers, and here we have a food that has been developed just for the guppy. We kept many guppies in aquaria where they were fed exclusively on different types of diet until we found one that gave the best rates of growth when measured by that photogrammetry technique. And that top-winning diet was combined to form this exclusive guppy food flake. We also have a colour food. Now what happened here was that as a hobbyist, I know that you like to win awards at shows by showing off your prize fish. And one thing is certain, that it does need to be colourful to attract the attention of the judges. So what I did was look at the sort of ingredients you get in food which enhance the colour of the fish, and found a particular compound called canthaxanthin, which we include in this basic diet. Now that's not a hormone, it is a naturally occurring food component, and this is included in that basic diet, and you will find that feeding the fish on colour food does indeed enhance their colour, not only for shows but also to increase their attractiveness, because fish are decorative. One thing also that it's rather unique about Aquarian is that with using these fresh ingredients, it's necessary to lock in that freshness so that the fish will be able to taste that fresh recipe. And to do this, we've hermetically sealed the product into a can. And I discovered early on in my trials with the fish that this had a very enhancing effect on that fresh flavour, which makes the fish so attractive, it makes the food so attractive to the fish. Certainly, in all the early work that I did with my fish, I found that although fresh food, using the type of aquatic animals that are available, would indeed make the food attractive to the fish, it is dangerous in that there are parasites and diseases that can be introduced. So what we have here is those same fresh ingredients, but presented in a form that is sterile, in a form that is safe to use and so convenient. And I certainly have kept my fish over many, many years fed exclusively on this diet, and they are prize-winning, happy and healthy fish.
One in 7 households in Britain own a pet fish. In fact, fish keeping is one of the biggest hobbies in the world, which is all good news for this factory, Thomas's, near Leeds, which manufactures a lot of the food they eat. But have you ever wondered exactly what you're sprinkling into the tank every day? Because there's a lot more to fish food than you think. So, Marinus, what sort of diet do fish need?
Well, before I answer that question, you have to realize that there are thousands of different fish species, which all have a different requirement of nutrition. We've blended an enormous range of different color flakes, each with a unique formulation, to suit all the requirements for all these different fish. For instance, the white flake, which is very high in carbohydrates. We have a black flake, which is very high in vitamins and minerals. We then also have a yellow flake, which is very high in fish proteins. A lot of fish will eat fish in the wild, and we have to provide them, even in captivity, with some sort of food which contains fish. The flakes are then blended, different colors together, to suit one specific group of fish. So, for instance, for the goldfish, which have a very high requirement actually in carbohydrates, because they can digest this so well, compared to the tropical fish, which we'll see on the other side, which have a much more higher requirement for proteins.
So how do you know if these fish like what they're eating?
Well, we have designed specific tests for them, where they get actually a choice to make each day. We're looking at how well they grow on the food, whether they like the food, whether the odor and taste is liked or disliked, and more important, we're looking at digestibility of the food. We collect actually the fish droppings, something quite unique, especially in this for ornamental fish. They're quite small, and we have special traps where we can collect them. We then dry them and analyze them, so we know exactly what nutrients have been digested and which not.
Advice on fish problems is available from the Aquarian Advisory Service, run by company consultant David Ford from his home in Halifax.
It's a free service where people can write to me with any of their problems. I've got a PO box number, and we try to help them. It's not only myself, and I've been keeping fish now for 48 years, so I've got a lot of knowledge that I can help people with. But also we will bring in other experts, and it's proving very popular. Now, last year, for example, I received 10,300 letters, so it keeps me very busy. Usually they write in saying that they've got some sort of problem with the fish, but when I study their letter and look at what has gone wrong, invariably it's the water, not the fish, that's wrong. That's the secret of fish keeping. Get the water right, the fish are then happy, and happy fish are healthy fish.
What does a fish actually give you as a pet? Because you can't stroke it or cuddle it or anything like that.
people think that, but do you realise that the goldfish is the most popular pet in all the world? It can be just a little goldfish bowl that the housewife keeps with the family pet that swims around for 20 years, you know? Right through you can have a complete coral reef in your living room. You look into that silent world, your heart rate goes down, your blood pressure lowers. It's a medically proven fact that keeping fish is good for you.
Some of you might remember that we made a visit here a few years ago when our editor Ian Hughes was most impressed by the professionalism in the way in which this place is run and feels that it's an ideal model for any animal charity. And there have been some improvements here since that last visit, with a brand new education centre, a national registry scheme, a new restaurant and gift shop and a massive arena too, so there'll be plenty for us to look at as the programme goes on. Now, thanks for filling in so many of your questionnaires, and as a result of those, this edition will be by way of a request programme. And our first request reflects what is obviously an increase in the number of inquiries you're receiving about fish keeping. And so, in this edition of Talking Practice, David Watson talks to Dr. David Ford of the Aquarium Advisory Service about the hobby of fish keeping.
What is the connection between a Yorkshire stone wall, the world's most modern pet care unit, and 2.8 million UK households? The answer is fish, ornamental fish. Waiting inside this building is Dr. David Ford, who's an expert in this field and consultant to Aquarian. David, why should vets be interested in fish keeping?
Well, fish are animals, and as animals they get diseases. And therefore vets have a professional, even a legal obligation to treat those diseases. Anyway, I think vets should take an interest in fish because it's a very important hobby now. It's certainly more than birds. There are more households with fish than with birds, you know. It ran along about 10% of British households for quite a long time, many years. And then a lot of marketing, a lot of advertising is done by the trade to improve the number of people keeping fish. And what has happened is that it's risen to about 14% and is still rising. So it's very popular.
And are all these hobbyists goldfish keepers?
Oh, no, no. Certainly, I think the largest number of people with fish will be the child with the goldfish that's a family pet. But it's become such a sophisticated hobby now. You can have tropical fish, you can have a whole coral reef in your living room. See all the sea fish that we've got in here. Let's go up to the laboratory and we'll have a look at some examples of the range that you'll find in the hobby.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Well, David, we're here in the Waltham Aqualab now.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about some of the tanks that you have set up here.
Well, these are typical hobbyist tanks. We use them for feeding trials, but obviously it needs to be the same sort of design that the ordinary fish keeper would have in their own home. And they do represent the three facets of the hobby.
Right.
That's the tropical, the cold water, and the marine.
Mm-hmm.
These are the first tropical tanks here. We've got 4 of them.
Beautiful, aren't they?
Well, notice this one, it's just sort of Amazonian jungle. Now there we've got real plants growing and typical Amazonian fish there, the tetras and so on, which are beautiful tropical fish. They of course have to be maintained at tropical temperature. So we have a heater thermostat in there, as well as some filtration system to keep the water sweet and clean and so on. One of the delights of the hobby is understanding all the technicalities and studying the needs of these fish and making it ideal conditions for the fish so they are colourful and happy and healthy in this environment. There is another tropical tank, but there we have not the real plants, these are plastic plants. Now these are for people who are only interested in the fish. They're not concerned with being an underwater gardener, you see.
I understand.
So there it's even simpler to keep. All you need is just a simple heater thermostat And then you feed the fish daily and you see them growing, and if you're really interested, you can breed the fish and raise the fry and so on. I mean, it really is a fascinating hobby.
And balancing the tank is no more difficult than with real plants.
Providing you've got the basic knowledge. Now here is a cold water tank. Now here you don't need a heater thermostat. Now this is goldfish, they're fancy goldfish, but see that this is an aquarium, not the little goldfish bowl. We don't like goldfish bowls. The water volume is far too low. The fish are unhappy in that very small area to swim around. Far better to have a real aquarium, at least 2 foot, preferably 3 foot tank.
So that's a basic message that we should be concentrating on as veterinary surgeons. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The greater the volume of water, the better. You know what it is. The answer to the solution to pollution is dilution. So what you want is a large volume of water. Now these are fancy goldfish, not the ordinary type. You know the ones that you used to get at fairs?
Yes.
Those days are ended, thank
But they
the
are
Lord.
related, are they?
Well, yes, they're breeds, man-bred, to give you a variety of shapes and colours. And there are lion heads, and there are orandas and veil tails, and they're really, some of them are really beautiful fish, and some of them are quite bizarre.
But all descended from a basic
From the
goldfish.
basic, yes.
Right.
There's even a goldfish society, the Goldfish Society of Great Britain, and they've got a membership of several thousand, all devoted to the study of these particular breeds of goldfish. Now you can even have a complete coral reef in your living room. Here, for example, is a marine tank. Now there we've got an artificial seawater. You can't have real seawater because of all the bacterial problems that you would have in isolating a small amount of seawater. So it has to be totally artificial. So you buy the salts and make it up into a solution according to instructions, and then you set up a system with a filter so that that matures and goes through what we call a nitrite crisis. And then the marine fish here that are on display are typical coral fish. Now these are not bred. We haven't yet perfected the technique of breeding them in captivity. So these are wild-caught fish, which means they come to the hobbyists complete with all the endemic diseases and parasites that occur in the wild.
So there's a particular veterinary problem with these
There
fish?
is, most definitely, yes. But they're beautiful fish, aren't they?
They all seem to be the most vivid coloured as well.
Well, yes, that's part, I mean, the coral reef is the most colourful part of the animal kingdom, and that's why they're so popular, because, as I say, you can reproduce that in your own home.
Now, as a beginner to the hobby, I might want to read about it. Where can I turn in the first instance?
I think the first thing to do is to get one of the magazines. There are 2 popular monthly magazines. I've got 2 here, look. Practical Fish Keeping magazine and the Aquarist and Pond Keeper.
Yeah.
Now, you know the circulation of these is greater than the dog or cat magazines.
Is it really?
Yes, very popular. Getting those will show you not only all the information on fish keeping, but also all the adverts to show you just how big the trade is.
Yes.
There's a tremendous amount of research and manufacturing out there producing equipment for the hobbyist. Now, all that equipment uses the very latest technology, the idea being that you take away all the problems of fish keeping, leaving just the pleasure.
Yes.
And again, that's all to do with filtration.
Now, I think
and
at
so on.
Aquarian too, you have an educational centre, an advisory centre, which provides certain basic information packages. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I run that. It's called the Aquarian Advisory Service.
Right.
It's completely free. People just have to write to me at a PO box number, which again will appear on the screen. This year I received 7,000 letters, so there's a lot of people out there wanting information. And a lot of those letters I reply saying, please see your local vet, because only he can supply the necessary treatment that's required for that particular disease problem.
Okay, so what have you got in this information package?
Well, there are beginner's guides, you know, little booklets, there are leaflets on specific subjects such as nutrition and disease and plants and so on.
Right.
But for the real basic beginner, we have a video called Beautiful Underwater Worlds, in which I'm talking to Peter McCann of the Tomorrow's World team, you know.
Yes.
And it's a very good introduction to the hobby and will be available to vets as well.
Oh, that's good. Well, as an absolute beginner vet, do you mind if I take this copy and study it?
Okay, be our guest.
Thanks for all your time today, Dave.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, with the practice video, you receive a questionnaire, and we ask you to fill it in, giving us ideas of subjects that you'd like covered in greater depth. One of those subjects, it will be no surprise to you, is fish and ornamental fish keeping. So in future editions, we're going to be looking in greater depth at veterinary and husbandry aspects of ornamental fish keeping.
Sculptures are edible. And if it doesn't get eaten, it goes off. Who does she remind you of?
I'm not sure. Maybe my mother.
There's her lover. The female lays her eggs at the bottom under a stone, and the male fertilizes them after.
My mother, definitely.
This is me, the voyeur. Quick, Leon! Up here!
And another completely different one here at Bishop Auckland, and again, everybody's welcome to come. I'm glad to see there are a few faces here from the Washington lecture. So what I'd like to do before I go on to the main lecture, which is fish nutrition, the story of feeding your fish, some new information on that. Before I go on to that, I want to just finish off the lecture that those people who are at Washington saw. Because what I did there was give a talk on fish keeping around the world. And I showed them fish keeping in everywhere from the Great Barrier Reef in Australia right through to Berlin Zoo Aquaria, that sort of thing. And I explained that then I was just off to Madeira to have a look at the fish that they've got there. So I brought a few holiday snaps to finish that off to show you what I found in Madeira. So if you'd like to hit the light so that we get a better picture, can somebody cope with that? So, what do you mean about holiday shop?
That's a quail looking fish.
Great, thanks very much. Okay. I noticed one or two people looking at the ponytail. It's not a fashion statement. It is part of a new treatment I'm doing for baldness. Now, if it works, I'll be a millionaire. If it doesn't, I'll be bald.
Still a millionaire.
Yes, Madeira. So, as I say, after I left Washington, we got the plane down to Madeira, and I got my waterproof camera and snorkel and all the rest of it, and went out to have a look at the fish that they've got there. And what I discovered is that the Madeira is a volcanic island, and it's about, from the top right down to the bottom, it's about 4 miles from the seabed all the way up to the top of this Madeiran island. And there is no shelving at all. It's a very steep-sided island. There's only other one that's as steep, and that's Taiwan, apparently. So, with being no shelving, there is no coral reefs at all, no coral fish to see. There's just the deep sea fish that are there. So I was very disappointed, swam around in the sea there, found nothing, wasn't able to take any photographs at all. So what I did was go off to their public aquarium, Aquario of course, it's all Portuguese there, you see, just to have a look at what sort of fish they've got swimming around that island, which incidentally is about 350 miles off the coast of Morocco. It's in the African part of the Atlantic. And one long-suffering wife, when are we going to have a real holiday, she said. Here we are going around looking at the fish that they got on display. Some very nice ones, huge grouper there, look, beautiful coloured I thought. Some very nice fish, and unusual fish, ones I've not actually seen before. These are a sucker fish. They're stuck to the front of the glass. But look at the brilliance of the colouring that they've got there. Again, quite unusual species. No common name. I've got all the Latin names, which I can't remember. Here is just one of their fish that I thought was similar to a coral fish, the sort of thing that you keep in a marine aquarium, dragonfish. But again, quite different to any that I've ever seen in the hobby. But what I found was most common around that particular island was these, which are horse mackerel. And they shoal around the island in their millions, and they, of course, become the victims for all the predators that swim in those oceans. And they've got all the usual sharks and tuna fish and so on, and the tourists go out and use the mackerel as bait to capture these huge game fish, and that's what they do for most of their tourists. But also the Portuguese go out and capture the fish, you know, the red fish there that they sell in the marketplaces, and all the local Madeiran people eat them. They're great fish eaters. But what they also have there are these, which are called espada, which is the black scabbard fish. Now, interestingly, these fish actually live in the deep ocean, and so far down that at night time, when they come up to eat the mackerel, they only rise to about 800 fathoms. So nobody has ever seen them swimming around in their natural habitat. Nobody has ever managed to capture one alive. Because what happens is the fishermen hook their, get the bait on the hook, which is the mackerel. They lower this down at night time, because they're a nighttime predator, into the deep ocean with a very, very long line. And they capture these fish, you see, with that mackerel and the hook, and then haul them in as dawn arrives. And as they rise up from this 800 fathom depth, they, of course, suffer the bend. They actually explode outward. And what happens is, I'm sorry about this, it's before your buffet, but all the innards explode out through the mouth.
They're in the
and it kills the fish, you see. I've read up all the papers on these fish, and nobody's able to say how they breed, what they are, anything. There is only a family name, a long Latin name, but no even species name. But they do call it the black scabbard fish because it looks a bit like a scabbard that you put a sword in. Now, apparently, when I was looking around the fish market, I discovered there were two varieties, which again is just not published in the science literature. This is the silver sort, which is not as sweet tasting apparently as the black one. So they sell rather cheaply. And sometimes they interbreed, obviously, because these black and silver ones that's there. But just have a look at the fish. They're needle teeth pointing inwards, and there's the eye. Look, a huge great eye for this nighttime predation that they do. Now, the Portuguese who capture these fish noticed that they were never alive, so they're very suspicious of them. So they just refuse to eat them. So what they do is sell them at the marketplace to the restaurateurs, who dress them in this way. Look, they cut out those teeth with a knife there, cut out the eye, and then chop up the long eel-like shape to give fish steaks. And that's what they sell to the restaurateurs, and they sell it to all the tourists. And the tourists all eat these, you see, thinking that they're eating some special Portuguese meal, but it's just because they won't eat them themselves. Now, the name they give them is interesting. As I say, they called it espada, which is a scabbard. When the restaurateurs look up the English word for scabbard from the Portuguese word, they don't find it in dictionaries. You don't find scabbard in modern English dictionaries. The nearest is espadata, which is the Portuguese word for sword. So they call them a swordfish, because that's the nearest they can get to in name. So all these tourists who go to the island eat what they think is a swordfish, but they're not. They're eating this imploded black scabbard fish, you see. Now this is how they dish it up. When you sit there in the restaurant and eat the Madeiran swordfish, as they call it, they say, would you like it Madeiran style? And of course you say you do. And this is how they dish it up, with a salad and potatoes and whatever. But there is the fillet of the espada, grilled, and on the top they've got a fried banana. That's the Madeiran style. Now they say that it's because it's the special flavour of eating the fish with the banana. In actual fact, what's happened is, all over the Madeiran island they've got banana plantations. It's permanently spring there, you see, so they get these bananas grow like one-o. But they're a special variety of bananas, which are very sweet tasting, beautiful they are, but they're only about that big, a very tiny one. Now, the European regulations for a banana say they've got to be that big. So they fall outside those regulations, so they're not allowed to call them bananas. So they can't export them. So the whole island is awash with bananas, which they've got to eat. So they feed them to the tourists, you see, with the espada. Okay, but that's not what I came to talk to you about. That's just to finish off what was said at Washington. Just a minute while I take this off. There we go. Okay. Sorry about the wobble. It's a dance floor. It's sprung, so the whole lot goes up and down. Now, I work for the Mars organisation. As some of you perhaps know, it's the Mars group that make up the Aquarian range of fish foods and remedies. Mars, of course, is the largest privately owned group of companies in the world. A huge organisation. There is a Mr. Mars, he's an American, but as I say, he owns the lot. With a turnover of something like $10 billion. It's a very, very large group of companies, about 57 of them, 57 companies right around the world. Some of the products people don't realise that belong to Mars. Uncle Ben's Rice, that's ours. Susie Wong Chinese Foods, Yeoman Mashed Potato, as well as things like Pedigree Charm and Kitty Cat and Whiskers and so on. Things like Smacko and Bistrock, and of course the Aquarian range. Now, Mars are famous for their pet food range, and they sell particularly Pedigree Charm and Jelly Bean Whiskers, which I'm sure you've all seen on the telly if you haven't got a dog or cat yourself. They're the top-selling brands. You might wonder why on earth Mars should be interested in us fish keepers. Well, this is the reason why. It all started back about, where are we, 64 was that? 68, yes, around that time. At the time, Mars was selling trill for the pet birds, which is the red one there, look. And this is the percentage of households owning pet birds. Canaries and budgerigars were very popular in those days. But what has happened over the years, over the last 20-odd years, is that the population of pet birds has gone down, and yet the ownership of pet fish by people like yourselves has gone up and up. And it's still on an upward climb at the moment, particularly with ponds, with koi fish and that sort of thing. And of course marine fish keeping has come in. So when Mars saw what was happening, they realised that it's important they get involved in selling fish food, fish remedies and that sort of thing, in addition to the trill for pet birds and swoop we do as well for wild birds. I got that right, haven't I? I've been known to say swill and troop. There's a lot of people, incidentally, still own dogs and cats. They're the figures for them, you see. These are percentages of households. And it's very interesting that we find most aquarists also own a dog or a cat. So, you know, that's quite interesting. Your pet minders sort of thing. And this is how it breaks down. These are figures for about 18 months ago. Of the 14.7% now, it's about 15% now of all households. So any 100 houses, 15 of them will own pet fish of one kind or another. Still the most popular, of course, is the goldfish. That remains the most popular pet in all the world. More people own goldfish than any other pet combined. Quite a lot of them, as you can see there, are outdoors, which is the outdoor pond. And of course, water gardening has become very popular. There's even now a water garden monthly magazine, which has just hit the marketplace. It's on sale at the moment. But quite a lot of people own both goldfish indoors now. But there's your percentage for tropical fish, about 2.6%, and still very small for marine fish, which again, as I showed in the previous lecture, is different in Germany, where 50% of fish keepers keep marine fish these days. So it shows what great potential there is for the future in marine fish keeping. Anyway, having got all that information, Mars obviously decided they ought to be in the world of fish keeping. And having decided that, they needed to study fish nutrition. As some of you know from previous lectures, I was given the job of developing Aquarian, which I did back in 1973, so it's more than 20 years old now, the food. But what has happened since I retired and others have taken over is that improvements in the recipe that I developed has taken place. And what I want to do this evening is to tell you about that development, which is the new formula, as you'll see all on there, but also to start with to explain to you about fish nutrition so that you'll think when you feed your fish some ideas on how to give them a better life and to make them happier and